The night air hung heavy over Point Pleasant, West Virginia. On November 15, 1966, a quiet darkness broken only by the flickering glow of streetlights. But for two young couples driving near the abandoned TNT area, that ordinary evening would twist into something terrifying. As their headlights cut through the fog, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, winged, with eyes that burned like hot coals. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, its massive wings stretching wide before vanishing into the night. This wasn't just some bird or trick of the light. This was the first recorded encounter with the Mothman, a creature that would haunt Point Pleasant for years to come. What makes this story so unsettling isn't just the description of the creature itself, though the idea of a winged humanoid with glowing red eyes is enough to send chills down anyone's spine. It's what happened afterward. Over the next year, hundreds of locals reported similar sightings, each account more unnerving than the last. Some claimed the Mothman followed them, appearing just before disasters struck. Others swore it was a warning, a harbinger of doom. And then, on December 15, 1967, the unthinkable happened. The Silver Bridge, a vital crossing over the Ohio River, collapsed during rush hour, sending dozens of cars plunging into the icy water below. 46 lives were lost that day. Coincidence, or was the Mothman trying to tell the town something? That's the mystery we're diving into today, a story that blurs the line between legend and terrifying reality. Why did so many people see this creature in the same small town? What connection, if any, did it have to the bridge disaster? And perhaps most chilling of all, has the Mothman really disappeared, or is it still out there, watching? Strap in, because we're about to explore one of the most haunting cryptid encounters in modern history, piecing together eyewitness accounts, government reports, and eerie theories that'll leave you questioning what lurks in the shadows. This isn't just a campfire tale. This is the legend of the Mothman. The first terrifying encounter unfolded like something out of a nightmare. Roger and Linda Scarberry, along with Steve and Mary Millette, were just driving through the TNT area, a deserted stretch of land dotted with old World War II ammunition bunkers, when their headlights caught something impossible. A towering figure, at least 7 feet tall, stood motionless in the middle of the road. Its wings, leathery and immense, folded against its back like a grotesque parody of a man. But it was the eyes that froze them, two glowing orbs, deep red like burning embers, locking onto the car with an eerie intelligence. Before anyone could react, the creature spread its wings, nearly 12 feet across, and lunged upward with impossible speed. The couples later swore it kept pace with their speeding car, gliding silently beside them at nearly 100 miles per hour before vanishing into the trees. Witnesses weren't just shaken, they were haunted. The Scarberrys reported an otherworldly screech, a sound that vibrated through their bones, while the Millettes described an unnatural silence, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. And they weren't alone. Within days, more sightings poured in. A local contractor, Newell Partridge, claimed his TV screen filled with static the same night his dog howled at something unseen outside, only to find the animal gone the next morning, tracks ending abruptly in the mud as if plucked from the earth. Another group of teenagers spotted the creature perched on the roof of an abandoned factory, its eyes reflecting their flashlight beams like twin pools of blood. What chills investigators even today isn't just the consistency of these accounts, it's the visceral fear that clung to every witness. These weren't drunken tall tales or kids seeking attention. Grown men broke down in police interviews, their hands shaking as they sketched the same horrifying details, those pulsing red eyes, the way it moved with a predator's grace, and worst of all, the unshakable feeling that it was watching them long after it disappeared. Even skeptics couldn't ignore the sheer number of independent reports, all describing the same nightmare creature in the same lonely stretch of West Virginia woods. Something was out there, and it was just getting started. As word of the initial sighting spread, Point Pleasant became a town gripped by both fear and fascination. Dozens of residents came forward with their own encounters, each adding another eerie layer to the Mothman legend. Take the case of Connie Carpenter, a waitress driving home late one night when her headlights illuminated a figure standing in the middle of Route 2. She described it as a gray, man-shaped thing, with massive wings folded against its back, motionless until it suddenly leaped straight up, vanishing above her car without a sound. Then there was Tom Urry, a firefighter who spotted the creature while driving near the McClintock Wildlife Station. He swore it stood nearly 7 feet tall, its wings stretching at least 10 feet from tip to tip as it hovered silently over the road before darting away faster than any bird he'd ever seen. The most unsettling pattern: these were ordinary people, teachers, farmers, even off-duty sheriff's deputy, all reporting nearly identical details despite having no connection to one another. A young mother named Faye Dewitt broke down in tears describing how the creature appeared outside her child's bedroom window, those glowing red eyes peering through the glass before it took off without so much as rustling the leaves below. Multiple witnesses reported an unnatural silence accompanying the Mothman. No flapping wings, no crunch of footsteps, just an awful stillness that made their skin crawl. Even hardened skeptics couldn't dismiss the sheer volume of corroborating accounts. A group of railroad workers filed an official report after seeing the creature perched on a water tower, its wings slowly unfolding like a giant bat waking up. Their foreman, a no-nonsense Army veteran, insisted they'd seen something that wasn't of this world. Perhaps most chilling was the testimony of a local nurse who encountered the Mothman near the Ohio River. She not only described the same towering figure and pulsating red eyes, but claimed the air around it smelled like ozone, that sharp electric scent you get before a storm hits. These weren't drunk teenagers or attention seekers. These were credible people from all walks of life, united by one terrifying truth: something unimaginable was stalking their town, and it defied every logical explanation. The abandoned TNT area near Point Pleasant wasn't just a random backdrop for these chilling encounters, it was ground zero for the Mothman phenomenon. This sprawling complex of concrete bunkers and overgrown fields, once a top-secret World War II munitions plant, had an eerie energy long before the first sighting. Locals whispered about strange lights flickering between the storage igloos at night, about disembodied footsteps echoing through empty tunnels. But after November 1966, those whispers turned to screams. Nearly half of all Mothman reports came from this desolate stretch of land, leading many to wonder, was there something about this place that drew the creature in? One theory points to the land itself. The TNT area was heavily contaminated with toxic chemicals used in explosives production, including mercury and sulfuric acid. Could prolonged exposure have mutated local wildlife into something unrecognizable? Some researchers point to sandhill cranes, large, red-faced birds native to the region, as a possible explanation. But witnesses were adamant. What they saw moved with unnatural precision, its wings folding and unfolding like a living shadow. Birds don't hover silently or pace speeding cars. And they certainly don't leave witnesses trembling with primal dread. Then there's the paranormal angle. The bunkers, built to withstand bomb blasts, were constructed in a perfect grid, a design some claim created unnatural energy patterns. Visitors often report malfunctioning electronics, sudden temperature drops, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. One paranormal investigator described the air as thick with static, like walking through an invisible web. Could these distortions have opened some kind of doorway, a rift where something from another world slipped through? The Shawnee tribes who once lived here spoke of ancient spirits guarding the land. Were they warning us all along? Perhaps most unsettling is the timing. The Mothman appeared just as the government began repurposing the TNT area for Cold War projects, including rumors of experimental aircraft testing. Declassified documents reveal strange black ops activity in West Virginia during that era. Coincidence, or was the creature somehow drawn to whatever was happening behind those rusted chain-link fences? Whatever the truth, one thing's certain: when night falls over those crumbling bunkers, even the bravest locals refuse to wander too close. Some doors, once opened, shouldn't be reopened. And some shadows are better left unexamined. The wave of panic gripping Point Pleasant couldn't stay confined to West Virginia for long. Enter John Keel, a seasoned journalist with a taste for the unexplained, who arrived in town just as the sightings reached their peak. While covering the story for a local paper, he scribbled down a description that would stick forever: a moth-like creature towering like a man. The name Mothman exploded into the public consciousness almost overnight. Keel's articles painted such a vivid picture that wire services picked them up, flinging the story far beyond the Ohio Valley. Within weeks, every major newspaper from Chicago to New York was running breathless headlines like "Winged Terror Stalks Appalachian Town" and "Red-Eyed Demon Haunts West Virginia." The media circus that followed was equal parts fascination and frenzy. Tabloids like the National Enquirer ran wild with theories, suggesting everything from government experiments to biblical prophecies. Tourists and curiosity seekers flooded Point Pleasant, some hoping to catch a glimpse of the creature, others armed with cameras and tape recorders hoping to debunk the phenomenon. Local businesses capitalized on the notoriety. Diners served Mothman pancakes, gas stations sold crude sketches of the creature, and one enterprising farmer even charged visitors to walk through his haunted cornfield at night. But beneath the sensationalism, genuine terror festered. Parents kept children indoors after dark. Hunters abandoned their favorite trails. The police department's phone rang constantly with new reports, some credible, others clearly fueled by hysteria. Keel himself noted how the atmosphere in town crackled with tension, writing that fear had become as tangible as the fog rolling off the river. Even those who never saw the creature felt its presence, glancing over their shoulders at every rustle in the trees or unexplained light in the sky. The line between legend and reality had blurred beyond recognition, and Point Pleasant would never be the same. What makes this media explosion so fascinating isn't just how quickly the story spread, it's how the Mothman became a mirror for the anxieties of the era. The 1960s were already a time of upheaval, with Cold War tensions and social changes shaking the nation. Here was a perfect metaphor: an unknown, seemingly unstoppable force lurking just beyond the edges of civilization. Whether people believed it was a monster, a hoax, or something far stranger, the Mothman had become more than a local oddity. It was now a national obsession, a dark fairy tale spun from equal parts witness testimony, midnight whispers, and the irresistible human urge to stare into the unknown. December 15, 1967, started like any other winter morning in Point Pleasant, cold, quiet, the Ohio River shimmering under a pale gray sky. Commuters bundled into their cars, some grumbling about the holiday traffic, others humming along to the radio. None of them could have imagined that by evening, the Silver Bridge, that vital artery connecting West Virginia to Ohio, would crumple like paper into the freezing waters below. The collapse happened in seconds, a deafening groan of twisting metal, then silence as dozens of cars plunged 60 feet into the dark. 46 lives were lost that night, a tragedy that shook the nation. But for those who'd spent the past year fearing the Mothman's presence, the disaster felt eerily predictable. Some swore the creature had been trying to warn them all along. In the weeks before the collapse, Mothman sightings reached a fever pitch. A school bus driver named Marcella Bennett claimed the creature appeared outside her home just days earlier, those glowing eyes watching from the tree line as if waiting for something. Another witness, a construction worker named Harold Gray, reported seeing it perched atop the bridge's suspension cables the night before the collapse, just sitting there, still as a statue, like it was inspecting the bolts. Even more chilling were the accounts from survivors who'd driven across the bridge that fateful evening. One woman later told investigators she'd glimpsed a dark, winged shape circling overhead moments before the first cable snapped. Another described an unearthly screech cutting through the noise of collapsing steel, a sound she'd heard only once before, the night the Mothman chased her car months earlier. Engineers later determined the bridge failed due to a single defective eyebar in the suspension chain, a tiny flaw with catastrophic consequences, but for many in Point Pleasant that explanation rang hollow. How could something so precise be mere coincidence? The Mothman wasn't just some random monster. It seemed tied to the tragedy, appearing at the site, watching the townsfolk, even vanishing from reports entirely after the bridge fell. Some researchers point to an even darker pattern. Prior to the collapse, multiple witnesses described the creature near electrical transformers, as if drawn to the humming current. Were those red eyes somehow sensing the bridge's impending failure, the way birds flee before an earthquake? Or was the Mothman something far more sinister, not just a warning but a cause? Theories spiraled in the aftermath. Parapsychologists suggested the creature was a crisis apparition, a paranormal entity that manifests before disasters. Others whispered about government cover-ups, noting the TNT area's ties to defense projects. But perhaps most unsettling was the testimony from rescue divers. One veteran salvage worker swore he saw something moving in the wreckage, not a body, not debris, but a shadow too fast, too fluid to be human. By the time the river froze over that winter, one thing was certain: whether omen or accident, the Mothman and the Silver Bridge would forever be entwined in the darkest chapter of Point Pleasant's history. And for those who survived, the question lingered: had the creature been trying to save them, or was its presence something far more unfathomable? John Keel wasn't just documenting sightings. He was chasing a mystery that spiraled far beyond winged creatures and bridge collapses. His book, The Mothman Prophecies, transformed the legend into something even stranger, weaving together UFO encounters, shadowy government agents, and visions of impending doom. Originally a journalist covering the Point Pleasant panic, Keel became convinced the Mothman was part of a larger, more sinister pattern. He interviewed hundreds of witnesses, but the deeper he dug, the more the story unraveled into realms even the most open-minded researchers found hard to swallow. Keel's most controversial claim: the Mothman wasn't just a cryptid, it was an omen tied to other paranormal activity plaguing the region. Locals reported strange lights in the sky, phone calls filled with static and garbled warnings, even encounters with pale, emotionless men in black suits who vanished without a trace. One woman claimed a caller who knew intimate details of her life warned her to avoid the bridge weeks before it fell. Another described being followed by a black sedan with no license plates, its passenger wearing sunglasses at midnight. Keel theorized these weren't coincidences but pieces of a puzzle, with the Mothman as its terrifying centerpiece, a harbinger linked to forces beyond human understanding. Critics dismissed Keel's work as sensationalism, pointing to his embrace of fringe ideas like ultra-terrestrials, beings from another dimension manipulating humanity. Even fellow paranormal researchers hesitated at his leap from eyewitness accounts to apocalyptic prophecies. Yet there's no denying his influence. The Mothman Prophecies became a cult classic, morphing the creature from local folklore into a global icon of paranormal lore. The book's chilling premise that some mysteries defy logic resonated deeply, especially in an era gripped by Cold War anxieties and societal upheaval. Suddenly, the Mothman wasn't just West Virginia's problem. It was a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that reality might be far stranger than we dare admit. Keel's legacy is a double-edged sword. On one hand, his work preserved first-hand accounts that might have been lost to time, giving voice to terrified witnesses dismissed by authorities. On the other, his theories blurred fact and speculation so thoroughly that even today, separating Mothman myth from reported reality is nearly impossible. Was the creature truly connected to UFOs and government cover-ups, or did Keel, like so many before him, see patterns where none existed. Either way, his book ensured one thing: the Mothman would never just be a footnote in cryptid history. It became a mirror reflecting our deepest fears, proving sometimes the most haunting monsters aren't the ones lurking in the woods, but the mysteries we can't explain. Among the strangest threads in John Keel's investigation was a name that sent chills down the spines of those who heard it: Indrid Cold. Described as a man with an unnaturally wide, fixed grin, Cold first entered the Mothman saga when a local contractor named Woodrow Derenberger claimed to have met him on a deserted road in November 1966, the same month the creature's sightings began. According to Derenberger, Cold emerged from a strange, egg-shaped vehicle, dressed in a sleek black suit that seemed too perfect, too artificial. His voice, calm and measured, carried an eerie detachment as he allegedly predicted upcoming disasters with unsettling precision. But what made this encounter so disturbing wasn't just the prophecy, it was the smile. Witnesses who later claimed to have seen Cold described it as stretched too far, like a mask that forgot how to bend. Keel became obsessed with Cold, weaving him into the tapestry of Point Pleasant's mysteries. The figure's appearances were sporadic but timed to moments of heightened paranormal activity. One woman reported receiving phone calls from a man matching Cold's description, his laughter like static scraping over glass, before her television switched to a channel that didn't exist, broadcasting garbled images of crumbling bridges. Another witness, a gas station attendant, swore Cold purchased a pack of cigarettes with money that later turned to blank paper, a detail straight out of folklore about otherworldly visitors. Skeptics dismissed Derenberger as a fabulist, but Keel uncovered a pattern. Wherever Cold's name surfaced, reports of Mothman sightings spiked, as if the two were entangled in some inexplicable dance. The debate over Cold's existence fractures even paranormal researchers. Some argue he was a government operative, part of a psychological experiment tied to the era's Cold War paranoia. Declassified documents reveal projects like MKUltra explored mind control and staged encounters to test public reactions to the unexplained. Others propose a darker theory, that Cold was neither man nor hoax, but something else entirely. Keel himself floated the idea of ultraterrestrials, beings from a dimension overlapping our own, manipulating events like puppet masters. The timing is hard to ignore. Cold's alleged predictions often preceded tragedies, not just the Silver Bridge collapse, but also smaller-scale accidents and even personal misfortunes among those who crossed his path. What lingers isn't just the question of whether Indrid Cold was real, but why his story resonates so deeply. There's a primal discomfort in the idea of a smiling stranger who knows too much, who appears at the edges of disaster like a shadow cast before the flame. His grin, frozen and unreadable, mirrors the Mothman's glowing eyes, both symbols of the unknown staring back at us. Whether a twisted coincidence, a masterful hoax, or something beyond our understanding, Cold's legacy endures as a reminder that some mysteries refuse to fit neatly into boxes. And perhaps that's the point, to keep us questioning, unsettled, peering into the dark long after the smile fades. The Mothman might feel like a uniquely American horror, but across the globe, cultures whisper of eerily similar creatures, winged enigmas that haunt the edges of human understanding. Take the owlman of Mornan, England, first spotted in 1976 near an ancient church in Cornwall. Witnesses described a towering, owl-like humanoid with glowing red eyes and tattered wings, its screech echoing through the foggy woods, a description so close to Point Pleasant's reports you'd swear the two creatures shared the same nightmare. Then there's the Jersey Devil, a beast rooted in 18th century folklore that stalks New Jersey's pine barrens. With leathery bat wings, a horse-like face, and piercing screams that freeze blood, it's been blamed for livestock mutilations and vanished travelers for centuries. The parallels are undeniable. Each of these entities emerges in isolated, liminal spaces, abandoned churches, dense forests, forgotten wartime ruins, as if drawn to places where the veil between worlds feels thin. But what's truly chilling isn't just their physical resemblance, it's how these creatures mirror humanity's deepest fears. In Chile, the chunchon takes the form of a disembodied head with enormous ears that flap like wings, a harbinger of death in Mapuche legend. The Philippines speaks of the manananggal, a vampiric woman who splits her body at the waist, her wings carrying her torso to hunt pregnant women under the moon. Even ancient Mesopotamia had the Pazuzu, a winged demon with a scorpion's tail, invoked both as a curse and a ward against worse evils. These aren't random monsters. They're cultural echoes reflecting universal dread of the unknown, of things that watch from the dark with eyes too knowing, wings too silent, and intentions beyond our comprehension. Theories attempting to explain these connections span from folklore to fringe science. Some anthropologists suggest they're archetypes, manifestations of primal fears about predators or the night sky, woven into stories across millennia. Others point to more tangible roots like mass hysteria or misidentified wildlife. Sandhill cranes, great horned owls, even large bats could account for some descriptions until you hear witnesses insist the creatures moved with unnatural intelligence. Then there's the paranormal angle, interdimensional beings as John Keel proposed, or remnants of extinct species clinging to shadowy corners of our world. The tatzelworm of the Alps, a winged serpent-dragon hybrid, shares the Mothman's knack for vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only shaken observers and blurred photographs. Perhaps the most unsettling thread linking these cryptids is their association with tragedy. Like the Mothman and the Silver Bridge, many appear before disasters. The Mothman sightings spiked around fatal accidents in Cornwall. The Jersey Devil's howls allegedly foreshadowed shipwrecks along the Atlantic coast. Even the Latin American duende, a small winged goblin, is said to wail before earthquakes. Coincidence, psychological projection, or something more, an ancient, misunderstood survival mechanism, a way for the subconscious to latch onto tangible omens in the face of chaos. Whether flesh and blood or something far stranger, these creatures endure because they tap into a truth we can't shake, that the world is vast and some mysteries refuse to be caged by logic. The next time you hear wings rustle in the dark, ask yourself, are you alone, or is something older than legend keeping watch? Among the hundreds of reported Mothman sightings, one persistent question lingers: could there be a rational explanation hiding in plain sight? Before we leap to interdimensional beings or government cover-ups, let's examine what science has to say. Take the sandhill crane, a large bird native to West Virginia's wetlands. Standing nearly 5 feet tall with a wingspan stretching over 6 feet, these crimson-faced creatures are imposing, especially in low light. When startled, their piercing calls could easily be mistaken for something unnatural, and their eyes, positioned frontally like a predator's, reflect light with an eerie red glow. Dr. Robert Smith, an ornithologist at Marshall University, notes that during migration season, disoriented cranes have been known to wander into unfamiliar areas, their awkward gait on land resembling a stooped human figure to a panicked observer. Then there's the barred owl, a nocturnal hunter with dark, soul-piercing eyes and silent flight, traits that align chillingly with witness accounts. Wildlife biologist Karen James explains how these birds, when startled by headlights, can appear unnaturally large as they flare their wings mid-takeoff. Add fog, adrenaline, and a pre-existing local legend, she says, and your brain fills in the gaps with whatever primal fear feels most plausible. Case in point, a 1997 study published in the Journal of Perception found that subjects exposed to dim lighting and ambiguous shapes overwhelmingly saw mythical creatures like ghosts or winged humanoids even when shown images of mundane animals. Our brains are wired to default to the extraordinary when faced with the unexplained. But what about the consistency across so many independent accounts? Psychologists point to a phenomenon called mass hysteria, where collective anxiety fuels shared delusions. Dr. Elena Voss, a specialist in crowd psychology, cites the Salem witch trials and more recent outbreaks like the fainting epidemics in Malaysian schools. When a community faces stress, economic hardship, Cold War tensions, even the looming demolition of a local landmark like the Silver Bridge, people subconsciously seek patterns, she explains. One person's misinterpretation becomes another's proof, and soon you have hundreds sincerely believing they've witnessed the same impossible thing. Skeptics aren't dismissing witnesses outright, they're highlighting how easily perception warps under fear. Take the infamous glowing eyes described by nearly every Mothman observer. Dr. Alan Fisher, a bioluminescence researcher, notes that certain animals like raccoons or deer have eyeshine that can appear red under specific angles of light. Now imagine that reflected in your windshield at midnight, he says, while you're speeding down a deserted road near a place locals already consider haunted. Even the Mothman's alleged telepathy, reported by some as a mental static or overwhelming dread, finds roots in science. Infrasound frequencies below human hearing have been proven to induce nausea, chills, and the sensation of being watched, all symptoms reported at the Tinti area. Yet for all these plausible explanations, gaps remain. How do we account for witnesses who describe the creature's movements like pacing cars at highway speeds or hovering without wing beats, defying avian biology? Or the bizarre electrical disturbances from fried car batteries to televisions broadcasting phantom voices? Even the most hardened skeptics admit something unusual happened in Point Pleasant. Whether it was a perfect storm of misidentification and panic, or something science hasn't yet grasped, the Mothman endures because it lives in that liminal space between what we can prove and what we feel to be true. And perhaps that's the most fascinating part of all. Amid the flood of Mothman reports, not every encounter held up under scrutiny. In the spring of 1967, a grainy photograph surfaced in a local newspaper, supposedly showing the creature perched on a water tower, wings outstretched. The image spread like wildfire until a teenager came forward admitting he'd rigged a makeshift costume using chicken wire and dyed burlap. His prank wasn't malicious, just a bored kid capitalizing on the town's growing hysteria, but it cast doubt on every other photograph that followed. Then there was the infamous Mason County Monster incident, where two farmers dressed in rubber boots and makeshift wings staged midnight appearances near their property, laughing as panicked drivers sped past. These hoaxes weren't just harmless fun. They gave skeptics ammunition to dismiss legitimate witnesses who'd been genuinely traumatized by something they couldn't explain. The problem with hoaxes isn't just that they fool people, it's how they distort the entire conversation. Take the case of Mary Hyre, a respected newspaper editor who documented dozens of sightings before her death in 1970. Critics often pointed to debunked reports to undermine her credibility, even though Hyre had meticulously separated verified accounts from obvious fabrications. This pattern repeats throughout cryptid history. One admitted fraud taints hundreds of unrelated cases, making it easier to shrug off the unexplainable as mass delusion. Even today, online forums brim with confessionals from people who falsely claimed Mothman encounters for attention, their tall tales muddying waters already murky with fear and folklore. But misidentification poses an even thornier challenge. Point Pleasant in the 60s was teeming with wildlife that could be mistaken for something supernatural under the right or wrong conditions. Great blue herons, standing nearly 4 feet tall with 6-foot wingspans, often wade through the Tinti area's marshes at dusk, their silhouettes eerily humanoid when backlit by car headlights. Barn owls, with their heart-shaped faces and blood-curdling shrieks, have startled countless campers into reporting demon birds. Even the region's black bears, when caught mid-stride on hind legs, can resemble hulking, fur-covered humanoids at a distance. Naturalist Paul Wexford notes that during the peak of Mothman hysteria, local wildlife centers were flooded with calls about monsters that turned out to be injured eagles or mangy coyotes. What makes these misidentifications so persuasive isn't just poor lighting or overactive imaginations, it's the power of expectation. Psychologists call it perceptual priming. When an entire town is braced for winged terrors, ordinary animals get upgraded to the extraordinary in the blink of an eye. A 1968 study by the University of Chicago found that volunteers shown ambiguous shapes in West Virginia's woods overwhelmingly saw the Mothman after hearing local legends, while control groups in other states described the same images as birds or debris. This cognitive bias explains why clusters of sightings often follow media coverage. Once the idea takes root, the brain starts fitting random data into that frightening template. Yet for all the hoaxes and missteps, something unsettling remains. Even seasoned wildlife experts admit certain accounts defy easy explanation. How do we reconcile pranksters in burlap costumes with reports from trained observers like pilots or police officers? One deputy sheriff, whose identity remains sealed in archived reports, swore he emptied his revolver at a winged figure that didn't flinch, only to find no tracks, no blood, just 6 bullets embedded in a tree where the creature had stood. Another witness, an Air Force veteran familiar with aircraft, described the Mothman's flight as all wrong, no banking, no glide, just straight up vanishing like a shadow when the light hits it. These aren't cases of mistaking owls for omens. They're persistent, detailed accounts that linger in the gray area between fact and folklore, resisting both blind belief and easy dismissal. The lesson here isn't that every sighting is fake. It's that separating signal from noise requires patience and rigor. For every staged photo, there's a witness too terrified to speak publicly. For every misidentified crane, there's a detail like the sulfuric odor described by multiple observers that no local animal explains. The Mothman's legacy endures precisely because it lives in that tension, where the known and the unknown circle each other like wary opponents. And perhaps that's the most fascinating part. Not the creature itself, but what our struggle to understand it reveals about how easily reality can bend under the weight of fear. The Mothman didn't vanish after the Silver Bridge collapse, it simply spread its wings. In the decades since Point Pleasant's nightmare, eerily similar sightings have cropped up worldwide, each bearing the creature's unmistakable hallmarks: towering height, leathery wings, and those haunting, furnace-red eyes. Take Chicago's so-called Mothman Summer of 2017, when dozens of residents reported encounters along the city's Riverwalk. Construction workers near the Du Sable Bridge swore they saw a winged figure perched on scaffolding, its silhouette backlit by the moon before it dropped into the water without a splash. A nurse leaving a late shift at Mercy Hospital described being trailed by something gliding soundlessly between rooftops, its eyes reflecting streetlights like twin stoplights in the dark. Even security footage from a downtown high-rise captured a blur moving faster than any bird, though skeptics dismissed it as a drone or trick of the light. But Chicago isn't alone. In 2019, villagers near the Volga River in Russia reported a devil bird stalking their livestock, a creature with a 7-foot wingspan that left behind prints too deep for any known avian species. That same year, Mexican farmers in Chihuahua claimed a similar entity haunted their cornfields, its screech so piercing it shattered windows. One rancher, Luis Guerrero, set up motion-activated cameras after losing 3 goats in a week. The footage showed only a shadow moving at impossible speeds, but the audio, a pulsing, staticky hum, matched descriptions from Point Pleasant witnesses 50 years earlier. Even more chilling are the reports from Chernobyl's exclusion zone, where urban explorers have photographed winged figures near Reactor 4, their forms distorted by radiation or something far stranger. Why does this phenomenon persist across time and borders? Some researchers suggest it's a case of cultural contagion. Once the Mothman legend took root, any strange winged creature became folded into the myth. But that doesn't explain pre-internet sightings in remote areas where locals had never heard of Point Pleasant. Others propose more tantalizing theories. Could these creatures be drawn to specific environments, abandoned industrial sites, river valleys, or places with high electromagnetic activity? Nearly every hotspot shares eerie commonalities: proximity to water, histories of tragedy, and lingering energy from human upheaval, whether war, disaster, or decay. Then there's the interdimensional angle. Physicist Dr. Lillian Cross theorizes that if other dimensions exist, their boundaries might thin in areas where massive energy discharges occur, nuclear accidents, bridge collapses, even concentrated human emotion. Think of trauma as a radio frequency, she says. Sometimes something on the other end hears it and answers. Whether supernatural or sublunary, one truth remains: the Mothman isn't confined to West Virginia's folklore. It's become a global shadow, a dark thread stitching together sightings too similar to dismiss. And with every new report, the question grows heavier: are we chasing a monster, or is it chasing us? The Mothman didn't just haunt the woods of West Virginia. It soared straight into the heart of pop culture, becoming a modern mythical icon that refuses to fade into obscurity. Hollywood was among the first to seize on its eerie allure, with the 2002 film The Mothman Prophecies starring Richard Gere. Loosely based on John Keel's book, the movie wove the creature into a web of psychological horror and apocalyptic premonitions, turning those glowing red eyes into a cinematic shorthand for impending doom. But what's fascinating isn't just the adaptation, it's how the film's chilling atmosphere, from its muted color palette to its dissonant score, mirrored the real-life unease of Point Pleasant's residents. The movie didn't invent the fear, it amplified it, introducing the Mothman to audiences who'd never set foot in Appalachia. Music and literature quickly followed suit. Indie bands like The Moth and The Flame drew inspiration from the legend, their lyrics painting the creature as a metaphor for unresolved grief or societal collapse. Even heavier acts like metal band Mastodon wove the Mothman into their album art, its wingspan stretching across vinyl sleeves like a warning. On the literary front, anthologies like The Mothman Files expanded the mythology, blending eyewitness accounts with speculative fiction that asked, what if the creature wasn't just an omen but a guardian? Or worse, a predator waiting for its next catastrophe to feed on. Visual artists, too, found endless fascination in the Mothman's ambiguous form. Illustrators like Abigail Lawson reimagined it as a tragic, almost beautiful figure, a lonely watcher cursed to foresee disasters it couldn't prevent. Street murals in cities from Seattle to Berlin depict the creature looming over bridges or tangled in power lines, a symbol of humanity's fraught relationship with progress and the unknown. Even haute couture got in on the act, with a 2019 fashion show in Paris featuring models in feathered, red-eyed headpieces that slithered down the runway like something between angel and omen. Perhaps the most telling evidence of the Mothman's cultural staying power is its transformation into a quirky, almost lovable mascot. Every September, Point Pleasant hosts the Mothman Festival, where thousands gather to celebrate the creature with themed pancakes, guided tours of the Tinti area, and sculptures of the red-eyed icon grinning from street corners. It's a far cry from the terror of the 60s, yet the undercurrent remains. The festival's souvenir T-shirts and plush toys can't quite mask the primal unease that birthed them. This duality, horror and humor, myth and merchandise, reveals something profound about how folklore evolves. The Mothman is no longer just a local legend or even a national curiosity. It's a mirror for our collective anxieties, adaptable enough to represent Cold War paranoia in the 60s, environmental dread in the 90s, and even modern fears of surveillance in an age of drones and AI. Whether painted as a demon, a misunderstood cryptid, or a campy icon, its wings cast the same shadow, a reminder that some stories can't be caged, no matter how hard we try to pin them down. Every September, the quiet streets of Point Pleasant erupt into something straight out of a cryptid enthusiast's daydream, the Mothman Festival. What began in 2002 as a small gathering of curious locals and die-hard fans has blossomed into a full-blown spectacle, drawing thousands from across the globe. The town, once gripped by fear, now leans into its eerie legacy with a mix of pride and playful irony. Giant Mothman statues, some menacing, others oddly cartoonish, dot the downtown area, their glowing red eyes a cheeky nod to the terror that once stalked these same sidewalks. Vendors hawk everything from handmade silver jewelry shaped like wings to, I believe, T-shirts, while food trucks serve up Mothman dip and pancakes drizzled with crimson syrup. It's part county fair, part comic convention with an undercurrent of something deeper, a community reclaiming its darkest chapter and turning it into something strangely joyous. But beneath the carnival atmosphere lies a genuine fascination that refuses to be trivialized. The festival's lineup often includes respected researchers and eyewitnesses who have spent decades studying the phenomenon. In shaded tents, you'll find authors like Jeff Wamsley, whose books compile declassified documents and never-before-published interviews, sitting beside elderly locals who still speak in hushed tones about that winter in 1966. One particularly chilling panel featured Mary Mallette, now in her 70s, recounting that first encounter near the Tinti bunkers with a clarity that silenced the room. "You don't forget eyes like that," she murmured, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. "Not ever." For thrill seekers, the festival offers guided night tours of the infamous Tinti area flashlights cutting through the same fog where the creature was first spotted. Guides weave between concrete igloos, their voices dropping to whispers as they point out spots where cameras malfunction or temperatures inexplicably plunge. But the real draw is the guest speakers, paranormal investigators, folklorists, even retired police officers who worked the Silver Bridge collapse. Their talks walk a delicate line between skepticism and spine-tingling speculation. One year, a physicist presented infrared footage from the bunkers showing an amorphous heat signature darting between trees, unidentifiable but undeniably there. Another featured a psychologist exploring why certain places become magnets for supernatural lore, drawing parallels between Point Pleasant and other window areas like Skinwalker Ranch. What's remarkable isn't just the festival's scale, it's how deftly it balances reverence with revelry. At noon, you might watch kids giggling through a Mothman egg hunt, their faces painted with wings. By dusk, you're hushed in a crowd listening to an audio recording from 1967, a garbed voice allegedly warning of the bridge's collapse played for the first time in public. The festival doesn't force you to choose between belief and skepticism. It invites you to hold both at once. Even the merchandise reflects this duality. Sure, you can buy a plush Mothman for your toddler, but you can also thumb through original police reports at a pop-up archive, their typewritten pages yellowed but chillingly precise. For locals, the event is more than a tourism boost, it's a kind of collective therapy. "We spent 30 years trying to forget," admits longtime resident Harold Cox, now a volunteer at the festival's history booth. "Now we realize the story's part of us. You don't heal by pretending the scars aren't there." That tension between laughter and lingering dread, between kitsch and bone-deep mystery, is what makes the Mothman Festival unlike any other cryptid celebration. It's a living testament to how folklore evolves, how fear can soften into fascination without ever quite dissolving. And as the sun sets over the Ohio River, casting long shadows from those winged statues, you might catch yourself glancing upward, just for a second wondering if the real Mothman approves of the tribute. Or if it's still out there, watching the festivities with those same unblinking red eyes. The dense woods of the Tinti area still hum with activity decades after the first Mothman sightings, not from winged creatures, but from the whir of drones and the static crackle of EVP recorders. Modern paranormal investigators have turned this forgotten stretch of West Virginia into a high-tech hunting ground, armed with gear that would have seemed like science fiction in 1966. Teams like Appalachian Spectral Investigations and Phantom Seekers International return year after year, their backpacks stuffed with thermal cameras, electromagnetic field meters, and audio gear designed to capture voices beyond human hearing. Their findings, a tangled mix of chilling anomalies and head-scratching dead ends that keep the legend alive. Take the infamous thermal flare caught by researcher Marcus Boone in 2018. His drone footage shows a humanoid heat signature darting between bunker 7 and 9, no wings visible, but a temperature spike nearly 20 degrees hotter than the surrounding air. The shape moves against the wind before vanishing mid-frame. Boone insists the equipment was calibrated, and the anomaly matched multiple witness descriptions of the Mothman's alleged heat emission. Skeptics counter that swamp gas or a passing deer could explain the reading, but Boone's footage remains a staple of cryptid documentaries. Then there's the EVP recording from Paranormal Seekers' 2020 expedition. A garbled voice whispering, "Look up," moments before their entire camera array malfunctioned. Played back at half speed, the phrase becomes unmistakable, though critics argue it's pareidolia, the brain imposing meaning on random noise. Some of the most compelling evidence comes from overlapping data. In 2019, two separate teams, one using LiDAR scanners, the other infrared, captured a towering figure near the old power station within minutes of each other. The LiDAR scan showed a 7-foot-tall obstruction with no corresponding physical object, while the infrared footage revealed wing-like heat patterns fanning outward before dissolving into the tree line. Neither team knew the other was filming nearby, ruling out collaboration hoaxes. But here's the catch: when researchers returned the next day, they found no tracks, no disturbed foliage, nothing to suggest anything had passed through. Not all investigations yield spine-tingling results. The sheer volume of debunked footage could fill a warehouse, drones misidentifying owls, thermal cameras mistaking steam from underground springs for paranormal activity. One widely shared 2021 video of a Mothman perched on a water tower turned out to be a turkey vulture with an unfortunate backlight. Even the most dedicated hunters admit 90% of their recordings have mundane explanations. Yet it's that elusive 10%, the unexplained thermal spikes, the EVPs in frequencies human vocal cords can't produce, the equipment failures that always seem to happen at critical moments, that keeps them coming back. Perhaps the most intriguing development isn't technological but psychological. Dr. Hannah Velez, a cognitive scientist who's studied paranormal investigators for over a decade, notes how the tinty area seems to heighten suggestibility. It's not just that people see things, it's that their equipment starts behaving erratically too. She cites instances where fully charged batteries die instantly in certain bunkers, or drones lose GPS signals only to regain them 50 feet away. The place itself feels like it's resisting scrutiny, says veteran investigator Laurie Chen, who's logged over 300 nights in the area. You'll review footage later and hear footsteps no one was there to make, or see shadows moving opposite to your light sources. Whether these phenomena stem from residual chemicals warping perception, some unmeasured electromagnetic effect, or something far stranger, one thing's certain: the Mothman's legacy refuses to be pinned down. As long as those crumbling bunkers stand and the Ohio River whispers past, hunters will keep combing the shadows with gadgets and gut instincts, chasing that fleeting glimpse of wings against the moon. And maybe, just maybe, whatever's out there is still watching them back. Human brains are wired to seek patterns. It's how we've survived for millennia. Spotting a lion's silhouette in tall grass or recognizing the faint rhythm of a predator's footsteps meant the difference between life and death for our ancestors. But this evolutionary gift has a darker flip side. Sometimes we see connections where none exist. Psychologists call it apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random noise. It's why we spot faces in clouds or hear hidden messages when a record plays backward. In the chaos of 1966 Point Pleasant, a town grappling with economic decline, Cold War anxieties, and the looming demolition of the Silver Bridge, the Mothman became a pattern people couldn't unsee. When a factory worker named Connie Carpenter described a winged figure near the river, others began noticing strange shadows everywhere, power lines twisting into winged shapes, owls perched on water towers suddenly seeming too still, too knowing. The brain doesn't just interpret, it constructs, stitching together fragments until they form something tangible. And in a community already on edge, the Mothman was the perfect thread. Then there's the comfort of the supernatural. Dr. Evelyn Chen, a cultural psychologist, compares cryptid sightings to psychological pressure valves. When reality feels unstable, jobs disappearing, bridges collapsing, people reach for explanations that restore a sense of order, even if that order is terrifying. A 7-foot-tall winged creature is frightening, but it's also concrete. You can sketch it, describe its eyes, outrun it in a speeding car. It's far easier to confront than abstract forces like corporate layoffs or aging infrastructure. This might explain why Mothman reports spiked just before the bridge disaster. The creature became a focal point for collective dread, a way to personify the unspoken fear that something worse was coming. The power of suggestion plays its part too. Once the first few sightings made headlines, the town became a petri dish for contagious belief. Sleep-deprived parents checking on their children at night might mistake a swaying curtain for a retreating wing. Hunters tracking deer through pre-dawn fog could misinterpret the screech of a barn owl as something more sinister. Studies show that when communities fixate on a legend, even skeptics start experiencing ambiguous stimuli, unknowingly priming their brains to interpret ordinary sights and sounds through that lens. A 2014 University of Virginia study placed volunteers in a simulated, haunted forest. Those told about winged entities beforehand were twice as likely to report supernatural encounters, even when shown footage of ordinary wildlife. But perhaps the most fascinating layer is trauma bonding. Shared fear creates intense social cohesion, a "we're in this together" mentality that can outlast the fear itself. Point Pleasant's residents weren't just neighbors, they were co-witnesses to the inexplicable. That bond persists today, woven into the town's identity. Annual Mothman festivals aren't just about merchandise and pancakes, they're reunions for people who lived through something no outsider could fully understand. The creature became folklore, yes, but also a kind of psychological landmark, a way to navigate memories of that turbulent era. At its core, the Mothman phenomenon taps into something primal, the human need to make meaning from chaos. Whether the creature was flesh and blood, mass hysteria, or something beyond our current understanding, its legacy endures because it satisfies a deeper hunger, the certainty that when shadows move in the dark, there's a reason. And sometimes that reason has wings. From the moment the first Mothman reports surfaced, whispers of government interference clung to the story like shadows. Why were certain eyewitness interviews abruptly cut short by men in plain suits? Why did local newspapers receive mysterious phone calls pressuring them to drop the story? Perhaps most telling, why did boxes of police reports from that era vanish from county archives, only to resurface decades later with entire pages redacted? These aren't just the ramblings of conspiracy theorists. Declassified documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests reveal a startling paper trail. Take a 1967 memo from the Army Corps of Engineers, marked confidential, discussing anomalous aerial phenomena near the Tinti area. The report dismisses sightings as mass hallucination, while simultaneously ordering increased patrols and electromagnetic field monitoring, hardly standard procedure for bird misidentifications. UFOlogists like Nick Redfern point to even stranger connections. In the months before the Silver Bridge collapse, multiple witnesses reported not just the Mothman, but unidentified flying objects maneuvering near the Ohio River. One declassified Project Blue Book file details an incident where two air traffic controllers at Gallipolis Airport tracked a blip moving erratically at 12,000 feet before it dropped vertically faster than any known aircraft. The object vanished from radar near the exact spot where, weeks later, the bridge would fail. Skeptics argue these were prototype drones from nearby Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, but the timing raises eyebrows. Even more bizarre are accounts from retired aerospace engineer Raymond Szymanski, who claimed in 2018 that colleagues whispered about biological UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles modeled after living organisms being tested in West Virginia during that era. Could the Mothman have been some grotesque experiment gone rogue? Then there's the curious case of the Indrid Cold files. While researching his book, John Keel stumbled upon a series of typed memos referencing a smiling informant matching Cold's description. The documents, allegedly from a Defense Intelligence Agency subcommittee, detailed interrogations of Point Pleasant residents about their sightings, not by local police, but by officials with no identifiable badges. One witness, a telephone operator named Mabel McDaniel, recalled being questioned for hours in a windowless room by men who knew intimate details of her encounter before she'd told anyone. They kept asking if it spoke to me, she told Keel, like they expected it to. These memos were never officially acknowledged, but their existence persists in researcher circles as potential proof that someone, somewhere, took the Mothman far more seriously than public records suggest. The most compelling cover-up theory hinges on the TNT area itself. Originally built for World War II munitions storage, the site was quietly repurposed during the Cold War for projects still classified today. Former workers now in their 80s have given conflicting accounts about late-night convoys and underground modifications in 1965, a year before the Mothman appeared. One retired security guard, speaking anonymously in 2020, described metal cylinders the size of refrigerators being lowered into Bunker 17 under armed escort. "We were told it was radar equipment," he said, "but then why did dogs refuse to go near it?" Conspiracy researchers allege these could have been early particle accelerators or even biological containment units, speculating that the Mothman might have been an unintended byproduct, an organism exposed to unknown energies. Of course, without declassified proof, these remain theories, but the pattern is undeniable. Wherever the Mothman walked, government shadows followed. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't whether officials hid evidence, it's why. Were they suppressing panic over a paranormal event they couldn't explain? Containing leaks about black-budget experiments, or, as some ufologists suggest, silently documenting an intelligence beyond our understanding. The redacted files and whispered testimonies paint a picture of systematic obfuscation, but the full truth remains locked away, waiting for some future whistleblower or document dump to bring it into the light. Until then, the Mothman's ties to power corridors linger as one of its most enduring mysteries, not just a creature of the woods, but perhaps a player in a much larger, darker game. What if the Mothman wasn't just an undiscovered animal, but something far stranger, a visitor slipping through cracks in reality itself? John Keel's controversial ultra-terrestrial theory proposes exactly that. Instead of framing the creature as flesh and blood or even paranormal, Keel suggested it belonged to a category beyond our understanding, beings from adjacent dimensions that occasionally bleed into our world. Think of reality as layers of fabric, normally separate but sometimes brushing against each other, and in those fleeting moments something slips through. This isn't just wild speculation. Some of Keel's most compelling evidence comes from witness accounts describing the Mothman's impossible movements. Multiple observers swore it didn't fly so much as flicker, disappearing mid-air only to reappear 50 feet away without traversing the space between. Others reported a static-like distortion around its body, as if it were slightly out of sync with our world. even the creature's alleged telepathic effects, those waves of dread preceding its appearances, align with theoretical physics ideas about dimensional bleed. If alternate realities exist, their boundaries might thrum with latent energy, perceptible to humans as nausea, disorientation, or an uncanny sense of being watched. Quantum physics offers eerie parallels to Keel's ideas. The many worlds interpretation suggests countless universes branch from every decision, each vibrating at different frequencies. Dr. Lillian Cross, a theoretical physicist, speculates that traumatic events like the Silver Bridge collapse could act as resonance points, weakening the barrier between dimensions. Imagine plucking a guitar string tuned to sorrow, she says. Somewhere, another string tuned to the same frequency hums back. This might explain why the Mothman seemed drawn to disaster zones, appearing before tragedies like a shadow cast from somewhere else. Even the creature's infamous glowing eyes fit the model. In string theory, higher dimensional objects cast bizarre shadows in our three-dimensional world, manifesting as impossible shapes or light anomalies. Could those pulsing red orbs be glimpses of the Mothman's true form, filtered through dimensional layers we can't perceive? The interdimensional theory also tackles one of the case's biggest mysteries: why the Mothman vanished after the bridge collapsed. If it was a biological entity, where did it go? But if it were a projection or echo from another reality, its departure makes grisly sense. Like a radio signal fading after transmitting its message, perhaps the creature's frequency only aligned with our world during that specific window of crisis. Some researchers point to similar phenomena like the vanishing black dogs of British folklore that appear before accidents, or Japan's yokai spirits tied to natural disasters. These entities share the Mothman's transient, omen-like nature, suggesting a pattern that transcends cultures. Yet the theory isn't without holes. Critics argue that invoking other dimensions is a cop-out, an unfalsifiable catch-all for unexplainable details. It's the modern equivalent of blaming gods or demons, says Dr. Alan Fisher, a skeptic. Just because we can't explain something yet doesn't mean magic's the answer. Others note that Keel's ultra-terrestrials sound suspiciously like outdated ether theories invisible realm science has since debunked. Still, even skeptics admit the Mothman's behavior defies conventional biology. No known animal hovers without wing beats, induces electrical interference, or appears and vanishes like a glitch in reality. Whether interdimensional traveler or something else entirely, the Mothman's enduring mystery taps into a fundamental human question. Are we alone in the universe, or is reality far stranger than we've dared to dream? Every reported sighting, every unexplained thermal blip on a researcher's camera, keeps that question alive, and perhaps that's the creature's true purpose, not to haunt or warn, but to remind us that the world's edges are frayed, and beyond them anything might be waiting. Long before headlights cut through the fog near Point Pleasant's TNT bunkers, whispers of winged figures haunted the Ohio Valley's oldest stories. The Shawnee people, who thrived along these rivers for centuries, spoke of the pale crawler, a gaunt, ashen entity with elongated limbs and eyes that burned like dying coals. Tribal elders described it lurking near burial mounds and river bends, its presence signaling coming turmoil. According to oral histories recorded by ethnographer James Howard in the 1930s, the crawler wasn't just a monster. It was a messenger appearing before floods, battles, or outbreaks of sickness. One chilling account tells of a Shawnee hunting party spotting the creature days before a landslide buried an entire village in 1788. The description, towering, winged, with an unsettling gait, echoes modern Mothman reports with uncanny precision. But the Shawnee weren't alone. Neighboring tribes like the Lenape and Cherokee passed down similar legends. The Lenape's winged sorrow was said to glide above the treetops before forest fires, its mournful cries woven into the wind. Cherokee healers spoke of the night flyer, a shadow that drank the breath of the sickening. Even the structure of these tales mirrors the Mothman's alleged behavior, appearing in clusters before disaster, then vanishing for generations. Folklorist Dr. Rebecca Loomis notes that many indigenous accounts specify the creature's favored thin places where water met land, much like the Ohio River's convergence with the Kanawha, the very spot where the Silver Bridge would later stand. Skeptics argue these parallels are coincidental, a case of retroactively fitting old myths to modern phenomena. After all, the pale crawler was often described as hairless and earthbound, unlike the Mothman's featherless wings. Yet other researchers highlight vanishing details in early European settler diaries that complicate the debate. A Methodist preacher's journal from 1823 recounts a congregation fleeing their chapel after spotting a great bat demon perched on the steeple weeks before a cholera epidemic decimated the area. Newspaper clippings from the 1890s describe farmers near Gallipolis reporting devil birds with glowing eyes circling their livestock before mysterious barn fires. These scattered accounts suggest something has been flickering at the edges of Appalachian consciousness long before the 60s. The debate takes a darker turn when examining indigenous warnings about the Tinti area itself. Shawnee tradition held that the land known as the place where the earth coughs was cursed after a bloody 18th century battle. Tribal leaders reportedly tried to dissuade the U.S. government from building the munitions plant there in the 1940s, claiming the ground was already sick. Could generations of sightings reflect an ancient, unheeded understanding of the area's energy? Paranormal investigator Marcus Boone discovered a startling pattern while mapping indigenous lore against modern reports. The densest clusters of Mothman activity align almost perfectly with old Shawnee ceremonial sites and burial grounds now buried under the Tinti bunkers. What emerges isn't just a question of whether the Mothman has ancient roots, but whether modern society lost the language to interpret it. Tribal stories treated entities like the pale crawler as complex symbols, neither purely benevolent nor malevolent, but forces tied to the land's balance. Contrast that with 20th century panic, where the creature became either a monster to fear or a puzzle to solve. Perhaps the most profound insight comes from Shawnee elder Nora Thompson, who told an interviewer in 1972, "Your people see a beast. We see a reminder that some places remember what happened to them." Whether the Mothman is the pale crawler reborn or something entirely new, its persistence in the Ohio Valley's shadowed corners suggests an unsettling truth. Some stories refuse to stay buried. And some watchers never blink. For those who lived through the Silver Bridge collapse, the Mothman wasn't just a campfire story, it was a shadow that clung to their most traumatic memories. Take Gary Felton, who was 12 years old when his family's station wagon plunged into the Ohio River that December night. He still remembers the deafening groan of twisting metal, the way the car's headlights tilted toward the black water as if pulled by an unseen hand. Decades later, sitting in his Point Pleasant living room surrounded by faded newspaper clippings, Felton's voice tightens when the subject turns to the Mothman. "I don't know what it was," he admits, rubbing the scar on his wrist from the crash. "But I'll tell you this, the night before the bridge went down, my little sister woke up screaming about a red-eyed giant outside her window. We laughed it off. By sunrise, we were pulling bodies from the river." His story isn't unique. Dozens of survivors and their families grapple with the same uneasy questions, their answers split between chilling conviction and raw skepticism. Then there's Martha Higgins, whose father, a bridge inspector named Carl, was one of the first responders that night. Sorting through his journals after his passing, she found an entry dated December 12, 1967, 3 days before the collapse. "Dreamt of that damn moth thing again," Carl had scrawled in his tight engineer's handwriting. "Same as last month near Bunker 12. This time it was on the bridge cables, pecking at the eye-bars like a vulture on roadkill." Martha shudders recounting it. "He was the most practical man I knew, never believed in ghosts or UFOs, but after reading that, I can't dismiss it." The journals revealed darker details, how Carl secretly marked stress fractures on the bridge's north side weeks before the official inspection, fractures that mirrored the exact failure point. Whether coincidence or supernatural foresight, the connection haunts Martha. Maybe it wasn't warning us, she muses. Maybe it was waiting. Not all survivors buy into the legend. Retired schoolteacher Elena Whitmore, who lost her husband in the collapse, bristles at the mention of the Mothman. That creature didn't twist those rusted bolts or ignore maintenance reports. She snaps during an interview at her kitchen table, her hands gripping a coffee mug like an anchor. People want something to blame besides neglect and bad luck, so they invent monsters. Yet even Elena pauses when asked about her neighbor, Tom Urry, the firefighter who reported a winged figure near the bridge hours before it fell. Tom wasn't a liar, she concedes quietly, but seeing strange things doesn't make them cause and effect. The most heartbreaking perspective comes from Daniel Ruiz, who was 6 when the bridge took his parents. Now a trauma therapist in Columbus, he approaches the Mothman through a psychologist's lens. Grief distorts time, he explains. When something this random destroys your life, your brain rebels. It strings together unrelated events, a nightmare, a shadow, a rusted bridge joint until they feel like a story with meaning. Yet Daniel acknowledges the eerie pattern, multiple witnesses describing the creature near structural weak points before disasters. Our ancestors called that the gift of dread, he notes, the ability to sense danger before it's visible. Maybe the Mothman's just our modern name for that old, nameless fear. What emerges from these accounts isn't a tidy explanation, but a mosaic of human coping, some survivors clutching the Mothman as a tangible villain, others rejecting it as a distraction from human failure. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, where folklore and trauma intertwine like the Silver Bridge's broken cables, still whispering their warnings beneath the river's current. Among the countless Mothman reports, only a handful of photographs claim to capture the creature, each more disputed than the last. The most famous, known as the Mothman statue photo, surfaced in 1967, showing a winged figure perched atop one of the Tinty area's concrete bunkers. At first glance, the image chills, a humanoid silhouette with hunched shoulders and what appears to be massive wings folded against its back, its head turned slightly as if aware of the photographer. But skeptics quickly noted anomalies. Forensic image analyst Dr. Jeremy Ridge points out the figure's edges are unnaturally crisp compared to the grainy surroundings, suggesting possible manipulation. It's either a masterful cut and paste job or a carefully placed prop. He concludes, even more damning, the original negative was lost, leaving only copies that degrade further with each reproduction, making modern analysis nearly impossible. Another widely circulated image, taken by a college student named Alan Williams in 1973, shows a blurry shape mid-flight near the Ohio River. Enhanced scans reveal wing-like protrusions and those infamous red dots where eyes should be, but the motion blur is so severe, it could just as easily be a heron caught mid-takeoff. Williams insisted he'd never seen a bird move that way, describing its flight as gliding without flapping, like a paper plane on a string. Yet when physicists modeled the photo's trajectory, they found the angle and speed matched a large bird startled by the camera's flash. The eyes, they argue, are likely lens flare from the river's reflection, a common issue with older cameras. The most intriguing and frustrating piece of visual evidence isn't a photo at all, but a snippet of 8mm film shot by a family on a roadside picnic in late 1966. The footage, just 12 seconds long, shows a dark shape darting between distant trees near the McClintock Wildlife Station. Enhanced frame by frame, the shape briefly resolves into something with a humanoid torso and wings before pixelating into abstraction. UFO researcher Linda Franklin championed the film as definitive proof, noting its biomechanical movement, nothing avian about it, but Hollywood special effects artist Rob Turner disagrees. That era was full of indie filmmakers testing creature designs in rural areas, he says, pointing to the film's abrupt cuts and the shape's suspiciously smooth motion. It's either a brilliant hoax or the world's worst managed cryptid encounter. What makes these images so compelling isn't their clarity, but their imperfections. The graininess, the shadows, the ambiguous shapes, they invite the viewer to project their own fears onto the blur. Like a Rorschach test in monochrome, they tell us less about the Mothman and more about our need to see it. Even the most debunked photos carry a residue of unease, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, the next frame would have revealed something undeniable. And perhaps that's why, despite decades of advancements in camera technology, the best evidence remains frustratingly out of focus, always one step ahead of proof, forever hovering at the edge of what we're willing to believe. Point Pleasant's relationship with the Mothman is more than folklore, it's a lifeline and a double-edged sword. After decades of economic decline, the town's infamous cryptid became its most unlikely savior. The annual Mothman Festival, which began as a quirky local gathering in 2002, now draws over 12,000 visitors each September, flooding the streets with tourists clutching coffees from the Mothman-themed cafe and snapping selfies beside the gleaming silver statue downtown. Hotel rooms sell out months in advance, and local artisans make a year's worth of income in a single weekend hawking handmade jewelry shaped like wings or T-shirts emblazoned with those eerie red eyes. The old dime store now houses the Mothman Museum, its walls lined with eyewitness accounts and artifacts that pull in curious road trippers year-round. For businesses clinging to survival in a town bypassed by interstates and big-box stores, the creature's legend is pure gold, but not every resident celebrates the spotlight. The same fame that fills cash registers also cements Point Pleasant's identity as the Mothman Town, a label that overshadows its rich history as a Revolutionary War outpost and thriving river port. Some lifelong locals wince at the way their home has been reduced to a cryptid punchline, its deeper stories lost beneath layers of monster merch. "We had a whole damn underground railroad stop here," grumbles retired teacher Marjorie Klein, gesturing to a weathered plaque near the riverfront. But ask anyone outside the county, and all they know is some half-baked Birdman story. The stigma cuts deeper for families tied to the Silver Bridge collapse who've watched their tragedy repackaged as paranormal entertainment. Survivor Gary Felton recalls tourists asking if they could visit the haunted bridge site before realizing the riverbank was essentially a mass grave. "There's a line between honoring history and turning pain into a sideshow," he says quietly, yet the economic reality is undeniable. Without Mothman tourism, Point Pleasant might have joined the ranks of forgotten Rust Belt towns, its storefronts boarded up and young people fleeing for cities. Instead, the festival alone pumps an estimated $3 million into the local economy annually, funding everything from school programs to park renovations. Clever entrepreneurs have spun the legend into unexpected ventures, like the couple who turned an abandoned gas station into the Mothman Distillery, selling winged bourbon with labels featuring vintage sighting reports. Even the town's detractors admit the buzz keeps vital services alive. "Love it or hate it, that monster pays the light bill," laughs diner owner Ray Maguire, flipping a Mothman-shaped pancake on the griddle. The balancing act continues as Point Pleasant grapples with its identity. Recent efforts to diversify tourism, highlighting Civil War history or the river's natural beauty, often get drowned out by the cryptid craze. But there's also a growing movement to merge the two, like historical walking tours that weave Mothman lore with authentic local events. Maybe the answer isn't choosing between legend and reality, but letting them coexist, a place where winged enigmas share the stage with underground railroad heroes, and where red-eyed statues point visitors toward deeper stories waiting to be told. After all, every town has its ghosts. Point Pleasant just learned how to make theirs pay rent. Smartphones have transformed the way we document the unexplained, and the Mothman legend is no exception. Where witnesses once relied on shaky Polaroids and handwritten police reports, today's encounters explode across social media within minutes, fueling debates that span from small-town Facebook groups to viral TikTok threads. Take the infamous Chicago drone footage from 2019, when a hobbyist filming the city skyline at dusk captured a winged figure gliding between skyscrapers. Within hours, the clip amassed millions of views, with comment sections split between awe and skepticism. Forensic video analysts dissected every pixel, noting the figure's lack of wing beats and unnatural acceleration, traits eerily consistent with 1960s descriptions. But here's the twist: the poster deleted their account days later, leaving no way to verify the footage's origin. This is the double-edged sword of modern cryptid hunting. Evidence spreads faster than ever, but so does misinformation. Deepfakes and AI tools have further muddied the waters. In 2021, a Reddit user going by Night Watcher posted a disturbingly realistic video of a Mothman-like creature perched on a Seattle freeway sign, its wings twitching as cars blurred past below. The lighting was flawless, the motion fluid, until digital artists pointed out telltale artifacts in the wing joints, signatures of generative adversarial networks. What once required Hollywood-level effects can now be conjured by a teenager with a laptop, making genuine sightings harder to trust. Even well-meaning witnesses face instant scrutiny. When a group of Ohio hikers live-streamed a winged figure near an abandoned railroad tunnel in 2022, the comments erupted with accusations of CGI. Only after geologists confirmed the unique mineral deposits visible in the background did the footage gain traction among researchers, a reminder that in the age of filters, context is king. Yet technology also arms investigators with tools John Keel could only dream of. Thermal drones now sweep the Tinti area nightly, mapping heat signatures against known wildlife patterns. In 2023, a team from the Appalachian Paranormal Society paired LiDAR scans with electromagnetic field detectors, uncovering anomalies near Bunker 12 that defied conventional explanation, a void in the scan where something blocked the lasers, yet left no physical trace. Citizen scientists worldwide collaborate through apps like Cryptid Tracker, logging sightings in real time with geotags and weather data. When 3 separate users in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ontario reported similar entities on the same stormy night in March 2024, the app's algorithm flagged the cluster as statistically improbable. Skeptics blame atmospheric conditions or mass hysteria, but the precision of these tools forces even critics to reconsider old assumptions. Social media's role isn't just about evidence, it's reshaping the lore itself. TikTok's Mothman tag teams with teens stitching together sightings with synthwave soundtracks, while Discord servers dissect police scanner archives for coded references to avian disturbances. Online communities have spun wild new theories, from interdimensional portals tied to 5G towers to claims the creature is a government psych op designed to test crisis reactions. The most unsettling trend: an uptick in reports pairing Mothman appearances with strange phone glitches, videos distorting mid-recording, devices registering phantom calls from unknown numbers moments before an encounter. Whether tech is drawing the creature out or simply making us more aware of its presence, one thing's clear: the Mothman isn't trapped in 1966 anymore. It's evolved, adapting to our digital world with the same eerie precision that once let it vanish into West Virginia's shadows. But perhaps the most profound change isn't in how we track the Mothman, it's how the Mothman might be tracking us. Security cameras now capture winged shadows scaling water towers in rural Michigan. Ring doorbells record discordant screeches echoing through Kentucky suburbs at 3 a.m. And in every grainy frame, every distorted audio snippet, the same question lingers: are we the hunters now, or have we simply built a better web for something else to watch us back? The cameras are rolling. The question is what's looking into them. the abrupt disappearance of Mothman sightings after December 1967 remains one of the most perplexing gaps in the entire saga. For 13 terrifying months, Point Pleasant lived under the creature's shadow, hundreds of reports, countless sleepless nights, a town gripped by collective dread. Then the Silver Bridge collapsed. The disaster that should have marked the crescendo of the phenomenon instead became its curtain call. Almost overnight, the winged figure vanished from West Virginia's skies as mysteriously as it arrived. No gradual fade, no scattered final sightings, just silence. This sudden absence fuels endless speculation. Did the creature's purpose end with the bridge tragedy? Was it somehow tied to the TNT area's energy, which shifted after the disaster? Or, as some researchers grimly suggest, did authorities succeed in silencing witnesses through means we'll never fully understand? Then there's the tantalizing possibility of hidden records. Despite numerous Freedom of Information Act requests, entire swaths of documents from that era remain classified or lost. Former Point Pleasant police officer Sam Lucas, who worked the night shift during the height of the sightings, claimed in a 2015 interview that boxes of witness statements and photographs were seized by federal agents shortly after the bridge collapse. "They didn't even give us receipts," Lucas recalled. "Just said it was a matter of national security and loaded everything into an unmarked van." Even more intriguing are the rumored Keel papers, supposedly John Keel's unpublished interviews and case notes, which his estate claims were stolen from a storage unit in the 1980s. What secrets might those pages hold? Names of government informants, sketches of the creature too disturbing to publish until these documents surface. If they ever do, the full truth remains frustratingly out of reach. Most baffling of all are the prophetic elements woven through the accounts. Multiple witnesses described eerie premonitions preceding their encounters, dreams of winged figures that matched later sightings down to chilling details. Others reported receiving phone calls from voices that seemed to know intimate details about their lives, often warning of impending danger. The most infamous case involved a woman named Sarah Jennings, who swore a caller warned her to avoid the bridge on the 15th, 3 days before the collapse. When investigators traced the call, they found no record of it ever being placed. Skeptics dismiss these accounts as retroactive confabulation, but the sheer volume of similar stories raises uncomfortable questions. Was the Mothman somehow manipulating time? Or were these prophecies evidence of a deeper, poorly understood connection between observer and phenomenon? Perhaps the most unsettling theory comes from physicist Dr. Lillian Cross, who suggests the creature wasn't just predicting disasters, it was attracted to them. "Think of trauma as a beacon," she explains. "Catastrophes generate immense emotional energy like ripples in a pond. Something capable of sensing those ripples might follow them to their source." This could explain why sightings clustered around the TNT area and Silver Bridge, both places steeped in human suffering, from wartime munitions work to the bridge's fatal failure. If true, did the Mothman leave because Point Pleasant's trauma had been spent, its purpose fulfilled? And if another community experiences a similar buildup of collective anguish, will those red eyes appear again? The lack of answers doesn't diminish the mystery, it deepens it. Unlike most cryptid tales that fade into campfire lore, the Mothman story remains unsettlingly unresolved. No carcass, no conclusive photo, no satisfying debunking. Just a trail of scared witnesses, redacted files, and whispered theories that grow stranger with each retelling. In an age where satellites map every inch of the globe and smartphones document everything, how does something this conspicuous stay hidden? Unless, of course, it doesn't want to be found. Or worse, it wants us to keep looking. The Mothman endures because it exists in that rare space between nightmare and mystery. A creature neither fully monstrous nor benevolent, but undeniably present in our collective imagination. Whether it was a misidentified crane, a government experiment gone rogue, or something far beyond our understanding, its legend taps into something primal. Here was no simple ghost story, but a phenomenon that left tangible scars. Police reports, weeping witnesses, a bridge reduced to twisted metal beneath the Ohio River. That friction between the documented and the inexplicable is what keeps us coming back, decade after decade, to those mist-shrouded bunkers and whispered accounts. Part of the allure lies in its refusal to fit neatly into any category. The Mothman isn't just a cryptid like Bigfoot lumbering through forests without agenda. It's not a ghost bound to one tragic location. Instead, it flits between roles, omen, predator, observer, morphing to reflect our deepest anxieties. In the 60s, it mirrored Cold War paranoia. Today, it's a symbol of surveillance culture or ecological dread. The creature's chameleon-like nature ensures it stays relevant, adapting to each generation's fears like a shadow adjusting to shifting light. For those hungry to step into the mystery, Point Pleasant remains ground zero. Walking the TNT area at dusk, tracing the Silver Bridge Memorial's engraved names, or chatting with locals at the Mothman Museum, it's all part of the lore's living pulse. The town doesn't just preserve the story, it wrestles with it, balancing tourism with respect for those who still shudder at the memory of glowing eyes. And if you listen closely, you might hear the murmur of newer sightings, Chicago's riverfront, Chernobyl's exclusion zone, as if the creature's legacy is still unfolding, daring us to keep looking. So the next time you're driving down a lonely road, pay attention to the trees crowding the shoulder. Notice how the darkness between them seems thicker somehow. And if your headlights catch a flicker of movement too large to be a bird, too deliberate to be the wind, well, you've been warned. Some stories don't end. They just wait for the next witness to pick up the thread. The Mothman may be out there still, wings folded, watching, and whether it's real or not hardly matters, because the fear, the wonder, the irresistible urge to glance over your shoulder, that's as tangible as the cold metal of the silver statue downtown, its crimson eyes glinting under the streetlights, forever on the edge of flight.